right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for joining us here at the Be More Clubhouse, a very special place in Baltimore for a very special announcement. Thank you all again for being here. It is great to be here with Councilman Robert Stokes. I'm glad today, Councilman, that we're talking about good news versus what we were talking about together yesterday. Our City Administrator, Chris Shorty, our Deputy Mayor for Equity, Health, and Human Services, Faith Leach, our Director of the Mayor's Office of Recovery Program, Shamiah Kerney, Sabria Brown, Senior Project Manager, and Anita Donaldson, Assistant Project Manager at Urban Strategies, Inc., Larry Simmons, Boyd Vice President, and Susan Malone, Executive Director with Wide Angle Youth Media, Michael Thomas, Vice President of the College and Noah Grant, Director of English Language Services with the Baltimore City Community College. Fagan Harris, CEO and President of Baltimore Core, is on his way. We also have Bonnie Polak of Biker Kolim, Coordinator, and Rochelle Goldberg from a board member with Biker Kolim. We have Bishop Dr. Reginald Kennedy, Board Director, Reverend Dr. John Lund, who's chair, and Dr. English with the Ministers Conference Empowerment Center, CDC, Tina Grace, who is the program director, and Philip Westry, the legal director with Free State Justice, Francesca Singleton, program director, and Raymond Nicholas, clubhouse member representing our gracious host this afternoon, Be More Clubhouse, Dr. Cleo Manigo, interim executive director, and Traymore Wilson, senior programming director representing the Pride Center. The work being done through Baltimore's diverse nonprofits is critical to the well-being of our residents and the realization of Baltimore's renaissance. And when we receive our American Rescue Plan allocation of $641 million, I was adamant that we set aside funding to directly support organizations working with our residents and in our communities to make Baltimore the more inclusive, vibrant, and thriving city we all know that we can be. That is why it is so important that we support our nonprofits as we prepare to emerge on the other side of the pandemic stronger than ever. Baltimore is one of a few major cities to even commit ARPA funds directly to nonprofit groups, and we made this decision because we recognize the value that nonprofits have to our city. However, this was a rigorous and highly competitive process. We had to review 341 ARPA-eligible proposals and make some hard decisions. But at the end of the day, we are proud to make the first round, and let me say that again, the first round of awards to an incredible group of organizations whose proposals will produce the greatest impact for our residents and our communities. The first round of funding totals just over $7.4 million to just these organizations. So, without further ado, the first round of awardees are as follows. Baltimore City College Foundation will receive $500,000 to support Baltimore's youngest refugees and asylees' academic needs. So we can clap for that. Baltimore Core will receive $371,000 to support workforce development activities, including career navigation, training, and identifying placement partners with a focus on Black, Indigenous, and people of color and female identifying residents. So we'll give Baltimore Core a round of applause. Biker Kolim will receive $285,000 to support continued operation of their COVID-19 vaccination clinic and provision of food, financial, and transportation assistance to all patients in need. Our gracious host, Be More Clubhouse, will receive $500,000 to assist individuals with mental illness to maintain recovery and stability and lessen their use of public behavioral health resources, especially emergency services. Free State Justice will receive $470,000 to support a person-centered network of health and housing providers to provide young LGBTQ Baltimoreans with an equal access to high-quality health care, housing, and resources. The Ministers Conference Empowerment Center, CDC, will receive $1.2 million to create a cradle-to-career pipeline. The pipeline will provide science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, STEM instruction, enrichment experiences, job shadowing, workforce training, job placement, and opportunities for career advancement in the railway, maritime, and other tech careers. Pride Center of Maryland will receive $1.3 million to address the issue of increased violence, particularly among sexual and gender minority populations through community outreach, individual assessments, benefits navigation, physical and mental health referrals, education assistance, enrichment activities, and employment programming. Urban Strategies, Inc. will receive $2.3 million to support Baltimore City residents impacted by the redevelopment of Perkins Homes by enrolling individuals in case management that will allow and provide opportunities for economic mobility, youth development, education, and health assistance. And last but certainly not least, the Y Angle Youth Media will receive $450,000 to support more than 200 youth between the ages of 10 through 24 participating in Y Angle's core programs where students learn to use state-of-the-art technology, embark on a pathway towards career readiness, and receive wraparound support services. Again, this was a highly selective process, and we have another set of awards that we will announce at a later date. The grant funding today increases the total amount of funding awarded to nonprofit organizations to over $23 million, including money distributed through the Baltimore City Civic Fund, MOED, MONSE, and the Baltimore City Health Department. In addition to ARPA, the City of Baltimore has provided support to nonprofits through other federal funding sources meant to respond to the COVID-19 public health emergency, such as the CARES Act. I want to thank everyone in every organization who applied for their willingness to help build a better, brighter future for Baltimore. And congratulations again to our first round of awardees. We're excited to support you in your very important work. Thank you all very deeply from the bottom of my heart. Now, I will turn it over to Deputy Mayor Leach for a few words. Deputy Mayor?
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Faith Leach, and I serve as the Deputy Mayor of Equity, Health, and Human Services right here in the city of Baltimore. And I am proud to stand alongside our mayor, Councilmember Stokes, with our Chief Administrative Officer, as well as with our Chief Recovery Officer and her dedicated team of public servants. I'm also very proud to stand here with leaders from Baltimore's best-in-class nonprofit community to announce the first round of ARPA nonprofit investments. In March of 2020, our city, like cities from across the globe, faced with a bleak diagnosis of an impending pandemic, saw businesses, we saw schools, and much-needed services close, as we were all forced to navigate uncertainty together as a community. But like they always do, Baltimore's nonprofit community showed up for our city in the hard times. They not only showed up, they stepped up, and they served. Even with constrained budgets, staffing challenges, and navigating the pandemic's impact on their own stability, they put our city and our city's most vulnerable residents first. From providing shelter, establishing multilingual information hubs, distributing food, supporting residents with getting access to rental assistance, unemployment benefits, and doing outreach to connect our residents to vaccinations. Our city's nonprofit partners worked alongside government and community leaders to ensure we were able to quickly respond to the needs of our residents during the pandemic. And now, as Baltimore's future looks brighter than ever, and our recovery is across the horizon, this mayor is showing his commitment to the people who were on the front line during the hard times, our nonprofit partners. And so together, with nonprofits, we will recover from the devastating health and economic impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic unearthed broken systems and an all too familiar reality for far too many Baltimore nonprofits, especially those run by people of color. Those organizations are often less capitalized and less resourced, but they're expected to manage multiple crises, from the pandemic, ongoing unmet survival needs, to structural racism. We ask them to do it all. We expect them to fill in the gaps caused by inequitable policies that led to disproportionate outcomes that were only exacerbated by the pandemic. That is why this process was rooted in equity. We've all heard the mayor talk about how we are all in this together: government, business, community, and nonprofit partners. Today is a manifestation of that commitment. With today's announcements, in addition to previous investments in the Nonprofit Relief Fund, Mayor Scott is demonstrating how we will work with partners to recover stronger. We know there's substantial need in our community, and there's a finite resources, not infinite, finite resources. But there are also multiple ways to support the city's recovery efforts through your continued work in the community and through ongoing partnerships with opportunities with city agencies. We know that with the help of our nonprofit partners, we will recover a stronger, more resilient, and beautiful Baltimore. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Leach, and thank you for your dedicated and bold service that you do each and every day. Our nonprofit community is a critical component of our efforts to build public safety, ensure equitable neighborhood development, prioritize our youth, and provide clean and healthy communities for all. And it is so important that we recognize their contributions and encourage them to continue their work each and every way that we can. Obviously, we weren't able to award funding to every organization that applied, but that doesn't mean that their proposals were unworthy of attention. It's a reflection of the diligence and rigor of our recovery office in evaluating these applications with an emphasis on equity and impact. And I also want to thank Director Kerney and her team for the role that they played in this process, and turn it over to her to talk about the selection criteria and the work that went into identifying these awardees that we recognize today. Shamiah?
Good afternoon. I'm Shamiah Kerney. I'm the Chief Recovery Officer of the Mayor's Office of Recovery Programs. As you all know, the Mayor's Office of Recovery Programs was established in July of 2021 with the sole intent of implementing $641 million in American Rescue Plan Act funding. With this infusion into the city, the Mayor, administration, and the Recovery Office have committed to using these funds with an eye on equity and making tangible impacts on Baltimore City residents. Today's announcement reflects that commitment. And I have to say, I'm a little overwhelmed with emotion because it's been a long process to get here. It feels wonderful to see all the happy faces of our first round of awardees, and I know that the administration is on the right track with ensuring that we are focused on the recovery efforts in this city and making sure that we are touching the most vulnerable of our residents. Baltimore City is one of a few cities for which I am personally aware that allowed nonprofits to directly seek funds to provide programs and services and assist in recovering from the negative health and economic impacts of COVID-19. To that end, we employed a robust application process, which included an in-depth review of the proposal and proposed budget. The Recovery Office received a total of 341 proposals that were submitted to our office, totaling $789 million. 322 proposals were deemed eligible, totaling $719 million, which is more than the $641 million allocation that the city received. The Recovery Office reviewed and summarized information to help inform decisions, which included council member endorsements, organization status to determine if the organization was in good standing with the city and state, risk assessments, GuideStar nonprofit data, and agency feedback. We also assessed where ARPA resources were already committed and identified areas where additional resources might be needed. To be clear, these decisions were not made lightly, and we understand that there are many organizations that may not be funded from the Recovery Office, but we remain committed to identifying other funding sources, which we update on our website at arp.baltimorecity.gov as we become aware of these opportunities, and working in partnership with our philanthropic partners. We thank each and every organization that provided a proposal and extended the hand of partnership to progress Baltimore City. Thank you.
Thank you, Director, and we'll hear from Councilman Stokes before we take questions. Councilman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to thank the awardees for their awards, but I want to thank you, Mr. Mayor, and your staff, because I know this was a vigorous applications and trying to figure out which ones you would fund. But I want to thank Mayor Scott, because there are a lot of organizations that do the work, but they never get the funding. So I want to thank you personally and your staff for giving to these organizations that actually do the work and finally get some money behind it to make it work. Again, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Questions? Questions? Keith?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Hold on, Keith. Let me turn you up. You good? Go ahead.
Okay, great. Great event here. Of course, we're covering it, Mr. Mayor, but we're also covering the breaking news that's happening now concerning, I'm sure, as you know, the civil rights attorney Benjamin Crump joining the lawsuit with Baltimore City Schools. What's your reaction to that?
Well, Attorney Crump is a fine attorney, and he's able to join anything he wants. You know, I can't talk about any open lawsuit against an agency, so I have no comment on that. And this is our country, and we have these processes, and the process will lay itself out.
Not talking about the lawsuit, sir, and you're right, you can't speak to that, but his allegations that, in his words, the Baltimore City school system has failed black and brown children based on performance and other items that he lists. Why don't you agree with this assessment?
Well, I didn't say I agree or disagree. What I said is that it's all a part of the lawsuit. I'm not going to litigate anything in public. But what I will tell you about is what we are doing, what we have seen, and what we know, right? We're talking about what I've been doing personally. And of course, as someone who graduated from city schools as a black man, I have my own personal testimony. But we're talking about an historic investment in funding that we just made into the Baltimore City school system, along myself with the support of the council. We're talking about me personally going through it. We're trying to appoint board members and get board members who want to invest and make sure that our system is providing the top tier education to our families. We're talking about no urban jurisdiction across this country building or renovating more new schools in the Baltimore City public schools over the past few years. Those are the kind of things that we have done. When you add that on top of our investment into rec and parks and investing in families, when you add that on top of our work with boys and young men of color, those are the impacts that we have. And then, of course, as you very well know, Keith, the personal time that I spend in our schools, working with our young people, mentoring our young people, being there to support them.
And of course you can't speak to the lawsuit like you said, but the lawsuit notwithstanding, how do you react to the criticism of your city schools?
Well, I just reacted. My last statement is my reaction. I'm not going to give you a different one than I just gave.
Okay.
Thank you. Dave?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Great event, and it's going to make news on Channel 11 tonight, this event. I have an infrastructure question. We've got 2 sinkholes in the past couple of days, and as you're aware, some of the city's infrastructure dates back to the Civil War in some areas. Can you tell us, is there anything more proactive going on other than having to respond and make repairs?
Well, I think that the big question out there that we're just awaiting, just like you, is how the infrastructure money and bill will flow and work with our cities. And when we know that, we are creating, as you already know, a infrastructure czar in office to be able to help us with that. We know significant amounts of money is expected to flow into the city. We know, Dave, as you know, a lot of that is about water infrastructure, sewer infrastructure, bridge, roads infrastructure. And we're going to be ready and working to be ready for that as our federal partners roll that out, so that we're not doing that any longer, so that we can be more proactive. This is something that I think and know that the president understands, which is why he spent all that political capital to do this, that this is an issue for all major cities across the country. And I know that from speaking with my fellow mayors, that this infrastructure bill is so severely needed, and we're just awaiting the guidance and the funding so that we can act appropriately.
The second sinkhole and I have not talked to DPW, that's why I posed this. Do you know the cause of that one?
No, but we'll get you a proper update on that one, and you'll be receiving an update on us from the previous one as well. So you should expect that. We were just on the call before we got here, and we'll make sure that we get you everything that you need.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Emily? You good? They're recording it, so you gotta go over to the mic. You're good.
Adam Willis from the Banner.
You're the first Banner person to ask a question at the press conference. Congratulations, sir.
Wondering if you can just talk about the awardees today, the ARPA awardees. What was it about these proposals that fits in with your vision for the distribution of ARPA money in Baltimore?
Yeah, when you think about what you saw represented here, right? You're talking about workforce development organizations that are working with folks who are part of residents in the city who have been historically underinvested in. When you talk about the folks and the great work that goes here in Be More Clubhouse, right, to make sure that we're helping all of our residents in needs. When you're talking about our ministers and the work that they do in our communities, obviously funding anything around COVID, where these organizations are doing the work, as you heard from Councilman Stokes, and many of them are not the ones that you typically see. But we see their work. We see the impact that they have from a human standpoint. And what we know that this investment will do is to help them expand the great work that they are already doing to touch more souls here and more neighborhoods in the city.
Can you talk a little bit about the challenges of getting ARPA money towards nonprofits that historically haven't received this kind of federal grant money versus those that historically have gotten those resources?
Well, I'll go in general context, and I'll let Director Kerney go into detail. For me, it was a decision that I made automatically that we wanted to invest in organizations that aren't historically invested in, right? That was an easy decision for me to make because that's the way I operate, from a lens of equity and understanding, and from someone who, before I came to City Hall, worked for nonprofits and worked with community members, even from my time on the council, to see these kinds of nonprofits not get that kind of support. What kind of mayor would I be? What kind of Baltimorean would I be if I didn't take the opportunity to say we have to help these organizations that just need a little investment to expand their great work? Shamiah, you want to talk any more about? That's it? We good? All right, we're good.
Thanks.
Emily?
It changed my mind. You mentioned there would be future rounds or round of funding. How many more rounds to nonprofits are you looking to do, and when would we see an announcement for that?
In the near future, and I'll give you a bone today and say rounds, not just rounds, but they'll be coming as we continue the process. You know, Emily, you know me well enough that we're going to be very diligent. We're going to cross every T, dot every I. We are not going to make some of the mistakes that we saw made in the past when you're talking about Baltimore and dealing with federal funds. Thank you.
There was some criticism lobbed in your direction or the administration's direction about the speed at which that these funds were coming out. You know, how do you feel about the length of time that it took at this point to get these funds distributed?
Well, I think there's a few things. I'm quite all right with the time, right? Because I think what we don't want to do is what we saw happen in the past, right? When Baltimore rushed to give out all this federal money, and then the taxpayers were on the bill on the back end because we had to send it back. But also, Emily, I think it's important for our residents and your readers to understand that this money was given to us to give out over an extended period of time, right? And you won't find cities that receive, you know, some receive 800 million, a billion, or whatever, that say, okay, we're going to just give it all away right now, immediately. You have to have processes in place, especially when we're one of the few cities that are dealing with nonprofits and outside of city organizations, to make sure that you are doing in the way that doesn't set you and those organizations up for failure that will directly negatively impact our residents. Thank you.
Can I jump in with one more? For future rounds, is there a set amount for how much money you envision going towards nonprofits, or is that still?
All of that will come out as we go through the process. All right. Thank you.